بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Before we look at this week's lesson, just a quick recap of what we discussed in last week's lesson. In last week's lesson I was mentioning various rules and regulations with regards to bathing the deceased. Thereafter, I then went on to mention the procedure of putting the coffin and shrouding the deceased in terms of the three clothing which is required for men, the izar, the lifafa and the qamis, and the two additional clothing required for women, the aforementioned three, and on top of that the waistband and also a scarf to cover the hair. And thereafterwards I concluded the lesson or the section by looking at some rulings with regards to ta'ziyah. And ta'ziyah basically means to console the bereaved family at this time of difficulty. That is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, known in Arabic as ta'ziyah. Now in this week's lesson, our aim is to look at the Janazah prayer in a bit more detail, and also we look at how to bury the mayyit and the deceased, and thereafterwards we will finish off by mentioning some other miscellaneous rulings connected to Janazah, connected to their burial and shrouding. And at the end, if we do have some time, we'll quickly look at the rulings or the procedure of how to pray the Eid Salah, which obviously is tomorrow. Now the first subsection which I'm going to start in this week's lesson is with regards to the Janazah Salah. Now in the Hanafi fiqh, praying Janazah Salah over the mayyit or over the deceased is considered to be a farz kifaya, a communal obligation. And this term has come before. There are two types of farziyat, there are two types of compulsory acts. One is called farz ayn, which means something which every single individual has to do. And examples of farz ayn are like, say, for example, your 5 daily prayers, your fasting, giving zakat, going for hajj. This is something which is obligatory for every single individual to do. If somebody else was to pray your 5 daily prayers, it's not going to be considered that your obligation has been fulfilled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because praying the 5 daily prayers individually by yourself, that is farz ayn, that is something obligatory and compulsory for every single individual. Then you've got another compulsory category which is called kifaya, farz kifaya. And farz kifaya again is farz, it's obligatory, but it's such an obligation that if one person or one member from the community, if he was to do this obligation, if he was to do this particular communal obligation, then it's going to be fulfilled from the rest of the community, it's going to be fulfilled from the other members of the community and of the area. So when we say that the Janazah Salah is a communal obligation, it means that if one member of the community prays the Janazah Salah, then the obligation will be fulfilled on the other members of the community. However, if no one prays the Janazah Salah, then every single member of the community, men and women, will be sinful for burying this deceased without praying his Janazah Salah. And this example can be found in other kind of rules, such as saying i'tikaf. I'tikaf is considered to be a sunnat muakkada ala al-kifaya, which again means that in each area there has to be at least one individual doing i'tikaf in the local masjid. If no one does the i'tikaf, then every single member of the community will be sinful, but this time they will be sinful for omitting a sunnat muakkada, for omitting an emphasized sunnah. But when it comes to the janazah, if no one prays the janazah, then every single individual will be sinful for missing out an obligation, something farz. And as mentioned in the hadith, that if somebody was to miss out anything farz, whether prayers, whether zakat, whether sawm, whether qaza prayers, so on and so forth, then he will be in, or he will be sent, or he will be thrown into the fire of hell for one ahqab. And one ahqab amounts to 80 years. So for missing out one obligation, you're in the fire of hell for 80 years. And again, 80 years doesn't mean 80 years of this dunya or this world, 80 years of the hereafter, which is even more longer. So that's the ruling with regards to the Janazah Salah. It's a communal obligation. One member has to pray, otherwise everyone will be sinful for omitting the Janazah Salah or for letting this brother or this sister being buried without Janazah Salah being prayed over them. Now there are two things which are fard in Janazah Salah. There are two obligatory acts or fard acts when it comes to the Janazah Salah. The first is the 4 takbir. So 4 takbir is obligatory and fard. And the second compulsory act of the Janazah Salah is to perform the Janazah Salah in a standing position. Yeah. Obviously those who are ma'zur, those who are disabled, those who are crippled, those on a wheelchair, obviously if they were to pray the Janazah Salah sitting down, then it will be accepted, it will be permissible. However, those who are able to stand up, it's obligation, it's compulsory that they stand and perform the Janazah Salah. So there are two compulsory acts for Janazah. Number 1 is the 4 takbir, and number 2 is the standing. Now if anybody missed one of the two conditions out, the Janazah Salah would not be done. So just as for example, you have the Imam leading the Janazah Salah, but he's leading from a wheelchair, or he's sitting down on a chair and he's leading the Janazah Salah, then that Janazah Salah would not be done. Or just say if one of the followers or muqtadis, if they were able to stand up, but they sat down and they prayed their Janazah Salah would not be done. Similarly, just say by mistake, if the Imam, after 3 takbeers of Janazah, he did salam to the right and the left. Sometimes it does happen that the Imam may forget, he thinks it was the 4th takbeer, but in fact it was the 3rd takbeer. So the Imam does Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and then he does Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Then again in that situation the Janazah would not be done. Because as I mentioned, that 4th takbeer is obligatory. If you were to do 3, your Janazah Salah would not be done. However, if somebody did 5 takbeers, then in that situation the Janazah Salah would be done. It's like in namaz, like you got 4 rakat Isha, but if you pray 3, your Isha would not be done. However, if you pray 5, then as we read before, like you prayed 5 rakats, then you realize that you prayed 5 rakats, what happened? And what you should do is that you should join another one, make it 6, so 4 will be fard and 2 extra will be nafil. Similarly here as well in Janazah, if you've done 5 takbeers and then you remember that, I've done an extra takbeer, your Janazah Salah doesn't become invalid, but what you will do is that you will just do salam, as soon as you've done the extra takbeer and then you remember, so you just do salam to the right and left, and everybody's Janazah Salah would be accepted and would be valid. There's no such thing as like you have to go for sajda sahwa, something like that for Janazah. That only applies for the normal 5 daily prayers, for Jummah, for Eidain and so on, but not for the Janazah Salah. Now, the next part which I'm going to talk about with regards to the Janazah Salah is who is the most worthy of leading the Janazah Salah. Who should lead the Janazah Salah? Somebody passed away, a Muslim brother or a sister passed away in a community. Who is considered to have more right in being the Imam and leading the Janazah Salah? Now when we look through the books of fiqh, the classical books of fiqh, it tells us that if somebody passes away, whether a brother or a sister, a man or a woman, then the most worthy of leading the Janazah Salah is the Amir al-Mu'mineen or the Khalifa at that time. So whoever happens to be the leader of the believers at that time, whoever happens to be the Khalifa at that time, he is the most worthy of leading the Janazah Salah. If the Khalifa or the Amir al-Mu'mineen is not there, the next in line is the Qazi and the judge. Obviously these two conditions can only be applicable in the Islamic state, where you've got the Amir al-Mu'mineen, where you got the Khalifa, where you got the leader, and in his absence then the judge, he tends to be the next in line, he will then lead the Janazah Salah. Then in the classical books of fiqh, it then goes on to say that in the absence of the Amirul Mu'mineen and also the Qazi, the next in line is Imamul Hay, i.e. is the local Imam. Hay means the area, literally Hay Arabic word means area. So the local Imam, he is the most worthy of leading the janazah. Thereafterwards, then number 4 comes the close relatives of the deceased, such as his son, his father, his brother, his uncle, cousin brothers, grandfather, grandson, then comes them under number 4. It's only in one classical Hanafi book known as Bahrul Raih, written by Ibn Nujaym rahmatullahi, only he's of the view that if the Qadi or the judge is absent or if he's not there, the close relatives of the deceased are more closer or are more worthy of leading the janazah salah than the local imam. But when you look at the majority of the classical books of it, they say that no, the local imam is more worthy to lead the janazah salah than the actual close relatives of the deceased. Now you may be thinking, and this actually made me ponder as well, that shouldn't it be the other way around? Should be somebody passed away. Obviously, you'll want your own son to pray the janazah salah. I'm sure that he would probably want his father, if his father was alive and he happens to be a scholar or an imam, he'll probably want his father to lead the janazah salah or his brother to lead the janazah salah. Why does he say in the books of fiqh that the local imam is more closer, is more worthy of leading the janazah salah? Now, the reason why, again, it's mentioned in the books of fiqh is when it comes to family or when it comes to close relatives, we don't know, because obviously we don't know what happens in a person's family. We don't know what happens in the 4 corners of a house. But what could happen is that the father, he may be, say, slightly aggrieved or missed against, he may be aggrieved against his son, in terms of like his son doesn't respect him, doesn't look after him, doesn't do his khidmah. So actually the father was growing up and he had this kind of dislike for his son. It could be something like, for example, his brother, he did something, so this person was growing up and he doesn't like his brother, or he doesn't like his father. Again, it should be based on religious reason, not because of petty worldly reasons or worldly issues. It could be something like the person who's passed away, he may be aggrieved against his son, he may be a bit angry over his son, he may be angry at his father, angry at his brother because of Islamic reasons, because of religious reasons. However, when a person, when he is praying salah behind an imam, and he regularly comes to that particular masjid and he prays salah behind the imam, that is a sign that this person enjoys or this person likes to pray salah behind this particular individual, behind this particular imam. So therefore, when this individual passes away, automatically the imam who he prays behind for all those years, automatically he'll be the most worthy to lead the janazah salah over him. Because after when it comes to family, we're not sure, he may not be just that he may be angry, at his son. So obviously when he passed away, he probably didn't want his son to lead the janazah salah. He'd rather have the imam who he trusted, who he thought was more pious, more knowledgeable than the son. He wants the imam to lead it, not the son. Or he wants the imam to lead it and not his brother. He wants the imam to lead it and not his father. So that's why the scholars have said that the local imam, he has more of a right of leading the janazah salah over the close relatives of the deceased. And this is something which is important because especially some brothers, when you speak to, they automatically think that, oh, my father's passed away, I'm the son, I've got a right to lead the janazah salah. And they kind of cause a bit of differences with certain mosques, and then they start going around and say, well, this mosque didn't let me pray my, lead the janazah over my father, and they make a big issue out of it. However, when you look at it, when you look through the books of fiqh, the exact ruling is that the local imam is actually more worthy than the actual son of the deceased. It's only if, say, for example, the local imam gives up this right and he says, okay, you can lead the janazah salah. That's okay, that's different. But if you want to look at it, technically speaking, the local imam, he is more closer, he is more worthy of leading the janazah salah. If he doesn't want to give up his right, then the close relatives of the deceased, they can't stop him, they can't do anything to him. He is the most worthy of leading the janazah and leading the prayer. Now this takes me on to another masla which is connected with this. Now I mentioned 4 people who are more worthy of leading the janazah. So it's the Khalifa, thereafterwards it's the Qadi, the judge, thereafter it's the local Imam, thereafter it's the close relatives of the deceased. And under that category of close relatives of the deceased, you've got, say, the son, he's more worthy, he's more closer. Then after the son, you've got the father. Then after the father, you've got the grandfather. So basically, there are 6 people I've mentioned here. Now, the ruling is that if anyone who is above the category which I've mentioned, if they led the janazah salah, no one afterwards has a right to repeat the janazah salah again. So just say, for example, the son, the father, just say a father passed away, and the son for some reason, I don't know, he got stuck in traffic, he couldn't make it to the masjid. And the imam, who is obviously, as I mentioned, more higher than the son, he just, after the salah, he just reads the janazah salah. Allahu Akbar, he does it. He finishes off. Day afterwards, then the son comes. Now in that situation, the son is not allowed to repeat the janazah salah. Why? Because someone higher than him, i.e. the imam, has led the janazah, so therefore, anyone below won't now have a right to repeat the janazah salah. However, if someone below were to read the janazah salah or pray the janazah salah, and the people above didn't have a chance or didn't read it, then they now have a choice of repeating the janazah salah. So just say, for example, just say the exact situation where in a masjid, the coffin in front of the imam didn't read the janazah salah, nor did the son or anyone let the janazah salah. What happened? Some normal, just musallis of the local mosque, they came and they started doing the janazah salah. Allahu Akbar. Now in that situation, because the local musallis of that area, because they're not related to the mayyit, to the deceased, they're not connected to the deceased in terms of the imam and so on. So therefore, if afterwards the imam finds out, because the imam is more higher than the local musallis, he has a right to now repeat the janazah salah, and he'll be allowed to repeat the janazah salah. Now the reason why I'm mentioning this particular ruling, that who's got a right to repeat the janazah salah or not, is this happens a lot, especially in those cultures where they take the body back to Pakistan or Bangladesh. Now what they do, you probably got some experience. What they do is, just say for example, a father passed away. Classic example, a father has passed away. And they normally say that, oh well, my father's wish that, he wanted to be buried in Bangladesh. Okay, remember, we'll touch on it later on as well, that if somebody makes a will or a desire, or he has a wish that he wants to do something, you need to ask yourself that this wish which he has made, does it comply with the Sharia or not? If it doesn't comply with the Sharia, then it's not necessary to fulfill that particular wish the deceased or the mayyit made before he passed away. A lot of people say this, that, oh well, my father made a wish that he wanted to be buried in Bangladesh, so that's why we're going to take the body to Bangladesh. Or my father or someone made a wish, or he made a wasiyah or a will that he wanted to be buried in Pakistan, so therefore we're going to bury in Pakistan. Now see, these rulings like transporting the body to another country is something which is impermissible and not allowed. So if a dying person was to make a wish of something which is not allowed, then you don't fulfill it. Let's say if he was to make a wish that I want my body cremated, are you going to now burn your father and you're going to scatter his ashes all over the park or something? You're not going to do that. If he was to say I want to be buried in the sea, you're not going to do that. If you say I want to be buried in Australia or something like that, you're going to go all the way to Australia and bury the deceased. No. So this kind of, again, it's like one of those silly reasons that you made a wish. They make a lot of wishes, but you have to see that whether does it comply with the Sharia or not. If it doesn't comply with the Sharia, then any kind of desires or wishes they make, it's invalid. You don't really need to fulfill it. So exactly here as well, just say, I said a classic example, somebody passed away, they're going to take the body to Pakistan or Bangladesh. Now what they do, you've probably seen in life, just say the son is going to take the body to Bangladesh. Now, obviously the people in Bangladesh, like say for example the deceased, other relatives like uncles, aunties, they want to see the body, they want to pray the janazah salah. So what they do is that the son, he won't pray the janazah salah in the UK, in England, because they'll pray 2 janazahs there. But the way they think they're getting around it is, oh, if I don't pray the janazah salah in the UK, but then when I take the body back to Bangladesh, then I will be able to pray the janazah salah, I'm able to repeat the janazah salah, and thereafter with the other people in Bangladesh in the villages, they'll also be able to repeat it. Now, what the ploy they're trying to do is that the son, he's not leading the janazah, or he's not praying the janazah in this country. And by him not doing it, he'll be able to repeat it when he goes to Bangladesh. So that's what they think they're doing. But the problem is that what normally happens is, the local imam then leads the janazah salah. Now, as I've already mentioned, that if the local imam leads the janazah salah, then no one afterwards, the son, the father, the grandfather, they don't have a right to repeat the janazah salah thereafter. So therefore, when the local imam, as soon as he reads the janazah in the UK, even though the son hasn't read the janazah salah, if he now takes the body to Bangladesh, he won't be able to repeat the janazah salah. Okay? They still do it, but technically speaking, he won't be able to repeat it. The only way, if they want to take the body back to Bangladesh and they want to still repeat the janazah salah, is like the son doesn't read it, and also you tell the local imam not to read the janazah salah as well. So as soon as the local imam reads it, then that's it, you can't be able to repeat the janazah salah. So obviously all the ploy they're trying to make, is going to be invalid. So the only way you could get around it is obviously the local imam doesn't pray and also the sons don't pray. However, if one of the sons was to pray in this country, then the other son who may be taking the body back to Bangladesh, he won't be able to repeat it. Okay? So just keep this masla or ruling in mind that as soon as anyone higher, like the imam or someone was to pray the janazah, then no one below the imam, i.e. the son, the father, have a right to repeat the janazah salah. So that is the masla with regards to janazah salah. Some of the rulings regarding janazah salah, just very briefly and quickly. Again, it's the ruling, or you could say one of the rulings of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that we say that we pray janazah salah over every single Muslim, irrespective of whether he was pious or whether he was not pious, or whether he was a transgressor, i.e. a fast. So even though a person may be a habitual sinner, drinking alcohol, committing adultery, well known, say, within the area to be, say, a gambler or all these kind of bad things, but even then, when he passes away, we pray his janazah salah. Okay? Unless he actually, and unless we got evidence to prove that all these things like committing adultery or gambling, he did it deeming these things to be lawful or permissible. Then obviously if that person was to deem these things to be lawful and permissible, then that will take him out of the fold of Islam. I think I may have mentioned this masla ruling before, that if a person was to commit a sin, or even to a certain extent he was doing it intentionally, he was committing a sin, like intentionally he was missing salah, intentionally he was committing adultery, intentionally, knowingly he was drinking alcohol, he is still within the fold of Islam. However, the only time where there will be a question mark over his iman and belief is if he was to do these grave and big sins, thinking it to be something lawful or permissible. Like thinking, oh, alcohol is lawful in Islam, let me just drink it. However, there's many ahadith and Quranic verses quite clearly prohibiting alcohol. Or gambling, says, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with gambling, Islam doesn't say anything about gambling, let's just do gambling and so on. So it's only then that will take that person out of the fold of Islam, and then obviously that is like a different issue. But anyone who committed great sin, but at the same time, like he still believed in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though he may not have prayed any salah in his lifetime, such a person is still classed as a Muslim, and he will have to pray his janazah salah. The only exception, which again is mentioned in certain books of fiqh, is that you should not pray janazah salah over a person who was killed, i.e. who was given the death penalty for killing his own parents. So if a person kills his own parents, and in the Islamic state the ruling is that such a person, when he's now caught, the death penalty will be given on him, and nafsu bin nafs as mentioned in the Holy Quran. So that person now who is getting killed for killing his parents, Janazah Salah will not be prayed over him. And the reason why is basically to show the severity of what he has done. But besides that, that's the only exception. But besides that, any other kind of individual, even though he may have been killed, say he was committing adultery. Now again, in the Islamic sense, if you commit adultery, you're stoned to death. So even if that person who has been stoned to death, you still pray his Janazah Salah. It could be someone like, for example, he killed another Muslim or a believer, either intentionally or unintentionally, and so on, and just said because of that the death penalty was given on him. So again, you can pray his Janazah Salah. However, if someone, as I just explained, killed his own parents, and now when he is killed, you don't pray his Janazah Salah. So that's the only exception. But besides that, anyone who, as long as he's a Muslim and he passes away, Janazah Salah will have to be prayed. Two more rulings with regards to Janazah Salah. The first ruling here is, how should a latecomer pray his Janazah Salah? Let's say the latecomer, a masbook, he's come and the Imam has already started the Janazah Salah. The Imam says already in the second takbir. So how should the latecomer join the Janazah Salah, and how should he pray? Now the ruling is that if somebody, say for example, has come to the congregation, the Imam has already started his Janazah Salah, so what would this person do is that he will straight away join the Salah, Allahu Akbar, and then he will follow the Imam in the remaining, say, one or two takbir. Thereafterwards, when the Imam says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, this latecomer, without raising his hand, he will just say the remaining takbir, Allahu Akbar. Let's say if he missed two, he will just say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and he will finish his salah in that particular way. There's no need for him to pray anything in between. So the takbir which he has missed, if he missed two, so after the Imam does salam, he will just by himself say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and then he will just do salam to the right and left and finish his salah in that particular way. If he missed three, then he will just do three. Even if he just say missed four, because what could happen is that he just joined the salah before the Imam was about to do salam. So again, he will just quickly do the four extra takbir by himself and just do salam to the right and left and finish his janazah in that particular way. And another ruling with regards to the janazah is that, again I mentioned this before as well, that janazah salah cannot be prayed during the three haram times. So three haram times when it is haram and lawful to pray salah, they are at sunrise, at sunset, and when the sun is at its istiwa, i.e. at its stationary point. So because during these three times it is haram to pray any salah, whether it's your qadha prayers, nafal. Similarly, to pray janazah at that particular time is also unlawful and haram. However, one is allowed or permitted to pray janazah salah after fajr and also after asr as well. It's only makruh tahrimi severely disliked to pray nafal salah after fajr and after asr. However, to pray janazah salah after these two times, then that is permissible and that is lawful. Now just very quickly, the procedure of praying the janazah salah. Firstly, you will make an intention that you're praying the janazah salah. Then afterwards you will say Allahu Akbar, so the Imam will say Allahu Akbar. Now after the first takbir, you will recite Sana, Subhanakallahumma bihamdika, all the way to the end. A question arises is that after the first takbir, can one recite Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen? Because in some ahadith it's mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, after the first takbir, will recite Surah Fatiha. And that's why Imam Shafi rahmatullah says that it's more desirable to pray Surah Fatiha. Now in the ruling in the Hanafi fiqh is that you should pray Sana. However, if somebody was to recite Surah Fatiha with the intention of dua, with the intention of supplication, then that is also allowed as well. So it's not that strictly that you have to recite Subhanakallahumma or Sana. If you were to recite Surah Fatiha with the intention of dua, then that is also allowed as well. That's the first takbir. After that, the Imam will then do the second takbir, Allahu Akbar. Thereafterwards, you will then recite the Durood Ibrahim, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, all the way till the end. Remember, the takbir which the Imam is doing, you don't raise your hand. For the Eid Salah, which I'm going to mention later, you raise your hand for the extra takbir, but for the Janazah, the fourth takbir, you don't raise your hand. Even the Imam did not raise his hand. After the second takbir is done and you read the Durood Ibrahim, then the Imam will say Allahu Akbar the third time, and this time you will read the dua, which is Allahumma kulli hayyina wa mayyitina wa shahidina, and this dua will be recited whether the deceased is male or female. And if it's a boy, if it's a young boy who has passed away, then there's another dua, Allahumma ja'alhu lana farata wa ja'alhu dhukra wa ajran. That particular dua you will be reading if it's a boy, and also for a girl, similar dua, but instead of Allahumma ja'alhu, it's got Allahumma ja'alha. Again, these can be found in Ta'lim al-Haq and other dua books. Okay, so that's what you read. Thereafterwards, the Imam will then do the fourth takbir, Allahu Akbar. Now, after the fourth takbir, you don't recite anything. The Imam will just give salam to the right and then to the left. One other question here which people ask regarding the janazah is that, you've probably seen it, like people, they've got their arms folded, and then when the Imam gives salam, you've probably seen some guys, they drop their arms to the right and then the left like this. Again in the Hanafi fiqh, it actually mentions that you can do both. There is actually some kind of, it is established to actually do that. So it's not like they made it up or something. It is actually established to do that. You could do both. You could just leave it as it is and just do a salam right and do the salam left. Or if you want, you can also actually drop your arms when you're doing the right salam and then drop your left arms when you are doing the left salam. You can do that. It is actually mentioned in certain fatwa books regarding both practices. So whichever one you do, then that is allowed, that is permissible. Okay, now thereafter, after you pray the janazah salah, the next thing you will do is regarding burying the deceased. So it's mentioned that there are two types of graves which one can dig. One is called a lahad grave. And a lahad grave is basically a grave where you say, for example, you dig down and then you make a side wall. Okay, so just say you're digging down and then on the side you dig another wall. Okay? And thereafter you're going to place the deceased or the mayyit inside that side wall, and then you cover everything up with the soil and the mud. That is called lahad. And the second type of grave which you can dig in Arabic is called the shiq. And shiq is like a normal trench, like a normal hole which you dig, like we do in the UK. Because obviously they don't really allow lahad. And also lahad may be difficult, especially as the UK is like a rainy country and the ground tends to be soft. So what would happen is that when you dig a lahad, the earth on top may collapse on it. So therefore it's best that you just dig a ship, like a normal trench, and then you bury and place the mayyit with deceased. However, say in India, Pakistan, they do this quite a lot as well. They tend to do a lahad because obviously because of the heat, the ground tends to be really, really hard. So therefore it's much easier for them to dig the lahad. And even though they've dug the lahad, the ground on top, because it's hard, it's not going to collapse on the deceased or on the mayyit. So obviously in India, Pakistan, it's much easier to do a ship. However, in the UK or countries around here, then it's much easier to do a lahad. Now, after you've buried the mayyit or the deceased, then it's mentioned that you should then only use that amount of sand or soil which you took out from that particular grave. There's no need for you to put anything extra. So what you took out from that particular land in digging the grave or in digging the ship or the lahad, then only that should be used to fill the grave up. And then he goes on to say that after you close the grave, then it's considered a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something desirable, that you should stay back. You should stay back, and then near the head side of the mayyit or the deceased, you should recite Alif Lam Mim all the way up to Ulaika ala hudan min rabbihim wa ulaika humul muflihun. and thereafterwards you should then go to the leg side of the deceased, and then you should recite from Lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ardi, the last 2 verses of Surah Baqarah, all the way until the end. Thereafterwards you should then raise your hands and then seek forgiveness and do dua for the deceased and do dua for the mayyit. Okay, this, what I've just explained, is established from hadith, because again, you get some people who say, oh no, it's not established from hadith to stay back and do dua and so on, think of it to be like an innovation. No, it's not innovation. There are many ahadith which talks about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after burying companions of Sahaba, he would do dua for the companions and the Sahaba and so on. So exactly as well that after you bury the mayyit or deceased, you recite these 2 sections from the Quran. You would also recite other surahs as well, like Surah Yasin is also good as well, any other kind of surahs, and at that time you should then pray for the deceased. There's some other kind of rulings with regards to janazah and mayyit and so on. Question here is, if somebody was to pass away at sea, then what should he do with his body, or with the deceased, or with the mayyit? Now the ruling is that obviously, let's say for example you're on a ship and somebody's passed away. Something you will do his ghusl, you should do the shrouding on the ship. With regards to his burial, if the land is nearby, just for example you're on a ship or you're on a boat. Now if the land is nearby and there's no danger of the body decomposing, there's no danger of the body rotting away, then the burial should be delayed all the way until you reach the land, and then you bury the mayyit or the deceased in the land. However, if the land is very far away, so in that situation you will be allowed to lower the body into the sea and bury him there. Okay? As I mentioned last week, that this is only when the person has passed away at sea. If he passed away like somewhere else, and then you go out to the sea and bury him, then that is impermissible, that is not allowed. This flexibility is only when the individual has passed away on a boat, say at sea, and the land is very, very far away, danger of his body decomposing and rotting away. In that situation, the fuqaha, the jurists have said that you're allowed to bury him in the sea. However, if he passed away like on the land, then to take him to a sea and then bury him there, and that is impermissible, and that is not allowed. Some of the rulings here, this is more got to do with the grave and the graveyard. Can you put flowers on the grave? Now, in the ruling is that to put flowers or bouquets or these kind of things on the grave is something which is makruh and something which is disliked. You're not allowed to do that. Now, some people do it, and then they use that hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari. Probably come across this hadith before, about once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passing by 2 graves, and one of them wasn't like cautious, say, with his urine, and there was another person who would tell tales. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that these 2 people, they are getting punished, i.e. the azab, but they are getting punished. But what they are getting punished for is something which we think is small, but in fact it's actually big. It's something which is serious, and that is not taking precaution when it comes to urinating, and also number 2, tell tales. We think of it to be a small sin. However, it's something which is big, and because of that reason, they are being punished in the grave. So it's mentioned there afterwards that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then got a twig, he broke into 2, and then he placed one on each grave. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that as long as this particular twig remains fresh, the punishment of the grave will be lessened and will be decreased on that individual. Now what people do, people using this hadith and say, oh yes, it's permissible now to have flowers and this, and some of them, if you go to Handsworth sometimes, the whole grave is full of flowers. You can't really tell whether it's like a grave or a flower bed there. So it's and they use this hadith and say, well, it's mentioned in the hadith of Bukhari, like the twig. There's a difference between a twig and a flower. Okay, so to use that hadith wrongly and to derive that it's permissible to place flowers by the twig, that is something wrong. What you should do and what is allowed is that whenever you go here and there to visit the grave, then you should just place a twig there with the intention that if this person is going through any difficulties, then obviously the twig will obviously lessen the azab and the punishment of the grave. With regards to the gravestone, which is placed on the grave, the scholars have mentioned that the only thing you're allowed to put on the gravestone is the deceased name, and you could say, again, not all scholars agree with this, but also say, for example, date of death. Fair enough, that's all right. Day of birth, day of death, that's okay. But what you're not allowed to place or put on the gravestone are verses from the Holy Quran, like kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut and la ilaha illallah, kalima, these kind of things you're not allowed. I mentioned last week that to put these kind of things on a coffin, that's not allowed because it's disrespectful. So similarly, to write kalimas and to write Quranic verses like kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut, that every soul must taste death, then that is not allowed and that is not permissible, because obviously, again, there's disrespect. But obviously what tends to happen is that sometimes around graveyards we get like animals, not all the time, but sometimes like cats or dogs, they may just like wander around. Sometimes they actually urinate on those gravestones as well. So these kind of things will then cause the Quranic verses to be disrespected. So this is something which we should refrain from. Now, one final mas'ala before we finish, which is linked with the grave, is and gravestone and graveyard, is what is the ruling of visiting the grave? Okay, now initially, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited both men and women to visit graveyards. And the reason why he prohibited was that at that time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw that many innovations were taking place in the graveyard. People were going there doing various other kind of innovations, especially during the days of ignorance. They will go there with rams, with sheep, and they would sacrifice rams and sheep for their, for the deceased, so in the name of the deceased and so on. So therefore, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited both men and women to visit graveyards. Thereafter, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then allowed men to visit graveyards, and women he didn't, but we'll come back to the ruling of women later. But he allowed people to visit graveyards, and the reason he mentioned فَإِنَّهَا تُذَكِّرُكُمُ الْمَوْتَ أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ, which means that by visiting the graveyard, it reminds one of death. And this is the whole purpose, when you look at it, of going to graveyards, and this is something you should try to go, even though you may not have a deceased, say, in the Handsworth Cemetery, which is the nearest one, but at least just go there, just visit it. The reason why is that when you go there, it actually puts everything into perspective, that this dunya which we are living is temporary. We're only there for a few years, thereafterwards we have to then prepare for the hereafter. And sometimes what happens is, because of our busy life, our busy schedule, we just think about the next day, we're just thinking about job, we're thinking about how we can earn the next pound or the next pence, how we can do this, how we can do that. And sometimes what happens is that many years of our life just passes, and we don't actually think about death, we don't actually think about the hereafter. So learning about even this section as well, we should actually, to a certain extent, learning about janazah, about how to bathe the deceased, how to shroud the deceased, to a certain extent that should actually encourage or increase the iman. That should actually put that sticker in your heart that, am I lapsing everything? Am I doing anything wrong? Am I doing anything contrary to the sunnah or to the sharia? That should then put the zeal in your heart that, look, this dunya is very short, this world which we are living in is only temporary, and we have to prepare for the hereafter. And again, I mentioned this many times before, that especially this month which we are passing by, the month of Dhul Hijjah, it's a very blessed month, and any kind of small deed which we do in this particular month will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reward, the sawab will be increased, will be multiplied. Similarly, on the contrary, that if we were to do anything wrong or anything sinful during this particular month, the sins and the gunas will also be multiplied as well. So what I'm trying to say is that take this opportunity to do good deeds and to do good actions. And always be mindful that death can come anytime. Just over the last couple of weeks, I had a cousin sister. She passed away due to cancer, and she was 36 years old. So again, she must have thought that, I've got a long life, I'm going to slowly I'll change, I'll do ibadah, I'll do worship. But at the age of 36, she's passed away. And just recently, a week ago, my brother-in-law, he still got hayat, he had a heart attack. He's 38. So again, he's probably thinking, you're thinking like on that day when he had it, like, yeah, I'm going to wake up, and again, he probably thought I still got another 20 years of my life, I'll change some, in the future I'll change. But what I'm trying to say, these two incidents which I mentioned, I'm sure you could think of it, you had so many examples, probably friends who at a young age have passed away. They probably thought that, yeah, we're going to live until 60, we're going to live until 70, we've got plenty of time left in this world to change our life. But the thing is that you don't know when death's going to come, and you may not have the time to change. So all these things, learning about the janazah, it shouldn't be just that we just learn about the janazah, that's it, like, just forget all about it. We should be there so that we actually, put that sticker in our hearts that we need to think about it in the hereafter. So this is why Rasulullah advised, encouraged us to visit the graveyard. Why? Because it reminds us of the hereafter. Inshallah, the ruling, continue with the ruling, inshallah, next week. Allah, tawfiq, wa tawfiq, wa tawfiq, wa tawfiq, wa tawfiq,